This is the Money Seed Podcast, where we discuss all things investing, plain and simple, the way it should be. Please remember, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be investment advice. Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. He's Chris Fergus and I'm Gabriel Stvore. And today we are talking about investing mistakes. And more specifically, some of the mistakes that we've made over the years. You know, the hard ways.
It's great. It's everyone likes to talk about their fantastic investments and everything they've done right. But this will be what have we done wrong and what have we learned from doing or sometimes not doing things.
Absolutely, and it's one of those where like people tend not to forget the times they've been burned, right? And I think every single person has made a bad investment in their life at some point. Right.
So to start off, Gabe, what's our quote of the day?
That's right. Yeah, the quote of the day. So actually, it's going to be two. It's going to be a profile and a quote for the day because it's put by the same person. So talking about Charlie Munger today, of course, the vice president or rather vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. Also, that's of course, Warren Buffett's company. So Charlie Munger is the number 2 person at Berkshire Hathaway. He's been the vice chairman since 1978. So he's had a good run. It's quite impressive. He's turning 98 years old in January and he is going strong. He is still the vice chairman. He still goes to press conferences, makes active decisions. He sits on the board of numerous companies, including companies like Costco, et cetera. So still very healthy, very active, 98-year-old investor. But he had this great quote. So he said, and I quote, "Most of Berkshire's success grew from stupidity and failure we learned from. I hope that makes you feel better about your own life," end quote. So I think that's a great way to start off the discussion. And Chris, maybe you can go first and I'll go second, but what was probably like the worst investment decision or mistake you've made? And maybe there's more than one, but like, what do you got for us?
I would say that there've been a couple. So I'll start with one that was a missed opportunity. And I've used that. I've talked in other podcasts about our airline stock and that worked out well for both of us. So the reason I did that was I remember back in 2005, right when there was the whole crash because of, it was 2009, right? The big 2009 crash with the housing bust and the whole economy was collapsing. And I remember at that point, I hadn't done really much real estate investing or investing in general, like any reading or research, but just enough to be aware that things were happening. And I remember a good friend of mine, he told me that he had a good friend at Ford Motor Company. And he said Ford at the time, the stock just bottomed out to like $1 or something. It was super low. And he said all of the big three, they took the bailout except for Ford. And he said that Ford was in a very good financial situation and they didn't anticipate, it was tough, but he completely saw them writing this out. And I thought, oh, like there's opportunity there, but I was so focused on just my job at the time. And I didn't know anything about investing. I thought I just didn't pull the trigger on it. And I didn't really have any money to invest anyway. So I don't really know what would have come of it, but after that, the stock went, after several months to maybe a year and a half or so, the stock went from like $1-ish. And this is, I may be off on the numbers, but it went from very low, like $1, $2, $3, something really low, up to $15 in maybe a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And I thought that would have been a phenomenal investment. And I missed it. Same thing. I remember when Facebook IPO'd and it came out like at $20. And I was sitting around and a friend of mine said he had this friend who and I was using Facebook and I knew it was a good company. I just didn't really know anything about it. So they took a loan for $100,000 and bought $100,000 worth of Facebook stock at $20. And I thought that seems like a big gamble, but Facebook is a good company. So I was just on the fence and I was like, I didn't know what to make of it, but it was such a big play. And I just didn't know what to make of it. And then I followed Facebook since then. And clearly he's done really, really well with that investment. And I thought, anyone who says that investing in single stock is a terrible idea, like, you can do it, but you have to know what you're doing. And the people that did well, that and there are other examples I'm not going to go into because I'll belabor the point. But when you know there's a good value stock and it's not a quick flip, it's not day trading, but you know that this is a good company that's undervalued and it's going to grow, you should go all in. And that's why I'm making the bet based on the previous episode we did on Tesla. I am following that exact same script with Tesla. Tesla just came out and it sat at almost nothing for years, and it's ticking up now. And it's really only started ticking up in the last year. So it still has I think, a long way to go. So I'm following the same script, and I'm looking to hold it for a couple of years. But if it follows something similar, it's going to go bankrupt or it's going to grow really, really, really well. It's one of the two. I don't think it's not going to be one of those companies that are just stagnant forever.
Interesting. Yeah. So, my personal stories is like for the first 3-4 years of my, in investing, I don't want to say career because it doesn't even resemble a career. Like my just, playing around with investing, it was just it was a bad scene. So this was I was in my mid-20s. I had very little money. And so I said, yeah, you know what? Like, you could finally buy and sell stocks on the internet, whatever. And I opened up a trading account and I funded it with $5,000. And I remember I saw on some like no-name website that, this website was claiming that like this no-name Canadian copper mining company just bought a whole bunch of like copper mining rights in like Africa somewhere. And, they're going to go big. Right. So sure enough, I followed the advice of this website that I knew nothing about. And I ended up buying $5,000 worth of stock in this company I've never heard of, in an industry I don't understand. I don't know anything about mining. And not just that, but at the time, I had no idea how risky mining is. Because a lot of these companies, what they do is, first of all, they're in a country where there's no infrastructure. They have to bribe local governments to get these mining rights, right, to the land and whatever. And then they don't even know how much stuff they're going to find there. I mean, they do some drilling ahead of time and hope for the best. And then they have all these different regulations with, export and taxes and bribing local officials and getting permits. And it's an extremely risky venture. And sure enough, I remember like after about a year and a half, 2 years, I ended up selling it for like $1,000. Like it went from 5,000 to about $1,000 in like 2 years. And that was a great lesson there. And the lessons there were basically, don't invest in companies you know nothing about. Don't invest in industries you know nothing about. And try to understand the risks that are involved, right? Because there could have been 100 less risky investments there. And anyway, so I learned my lesson there. And the second one, the second story that is kind of etched in my memory is back, same thing, 2009, during the banking, like financial collapse. I remember back then, like the internet at work was still controlled, right? Like most websites I was unable to access while I was at work, right? So I remember I was able to find this one website that was not blocked by like the company I was working for. And I was able to go to this website, use a remote desktop, and dial into my computer at home, which was on all the time. This was like 2009, right? Like March or April, whatever. And I was able to trade stocks during the day from work, like, which was like a big no-no. I think I would have been fired had my company found out, but I got away with it. And I remember I was watching this really carefully. I was watching Citibank, right? It's the ticker C. I was watching it go down. Banks got hammered in 2009. And so I remember Citibank was down to 80 cents a share, 80 cents. And I'm at work. I bought 1,000 shares for $800. And this was like maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And then by like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it went up to like $1.60 and I sold it. And I'm like, I just made $800. I remember driving home that day thinking I am like the smartest person in the world. Like I am a bona fide genius. I just made $800. I think that $800 was like, equivalent to like 2 or 3 days worth of work at the time. Right. I was like, I just made $800. I'm awesome. Right. And I remember how like happy I was about it. And it wasn't until like years later that I realized, why did I sell it? Like if I would have just held on to it, and I actually, just before this, we recorded this episode, I checked Citibank right now is at $60 a share. So that $800 investment would be worth $60,000 today, right? Here we are almost almost 13 years later, right? So it's not like, yeah, I made $800, but in reality, I gave up like whatever, $59,000 of gains because I'm just an impatient human being. And that's a big thing. Is like, if you have a good stock, good company, just like let it go. Like don't have that, fight that urge to panic sell and just control your emotions. And that was a big lesson for me. And again, like those opportunities that happened in 2009, those only come around a few times in your life, right? Like you don't have a 2009 come around very often. So that for me was a big lesson.
There's a book called The Little Book That Beats the Market, and that's the principles of that book. It's a very quick read. You can probably read it in like an hour or two, or you can listen to it on Audible. And again, super quick read, or listen to if you listen to it at like 1.5 to 2 times speed. But that's the gist of the book is you just wait and you buy undervalued stock, and then you just buy it and you sit on it. And even if it dips down, as long as the company doesn't go bankrupt, it's going to come back up and you'll probably get a good return. And I prefer that strategy than trying to day trade or just put money in a large, like I have money in index funds based on just my 401k plan. But if I'm going to invest in a stock, I'd rather go heavy in on a stock that has aggressive growth potential that's unlikely to go bankrupt.
Absolutely. And I think that was the exact same strategy that you employed with the airlines, right? Back in early 2020, when the airlines, everybody was panic selling everything, when the market was tanking around March, April of 2020, I think you and I looked at the airline stocks and okay, how much cash do they have on their books? What's their cash burn rate? How long can they survive? 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever. We picked 2 or 3 good airline stocks. You held on to them. I bought in, and sure enough, I still didn't learn my lesson. After 2 or 3 months, I made my $2,000-3,000 on my little investment there, and I sold, and I'm like, yeah, I made $2,000-3,000. And sure enough, had I held on to it, I would have made a lot more. And so here we go again. I'm making the same mistake, 9 years after the fact. So it's okay. I'm learning slowly but surely. I'm learning.
So I'll ask you again, since you're my friend and business partner. Are you going to do that again?
So I'm definitely going to invest again. I mean, I'm never going to stop
investing. I know
investing,
you're going to invest again, but are you going to make the same mistake again? Because this is an important thing. So actually, we had this conversation because I said, why did you sell so early? Because even if the stock doesn't go up, if you hold the stock for at least a year, then it goes from like W-2 income tax to capital gains income tax, which is, I think, like 10, 15, or 20%, depending on your income bracket.
You're absolutely right. And it's interesting trying to go back. I don't know what state of mind I was in, but I think a lot of it is human psychology. A lot of humans, I think it's natural for people. As soon as you see the stock going up, you want to have this, you have this urge to just sell and lock in that gain. Because you think if I sell it, I lock in that gain is protected. It's, even if the stock drops, it's mine now. Like I took it off the table. Whereas people tend to behave the opposite on the downside. When a stock is losing and people should be selling it, they actually want to hold on to it for longer and longer in the hope that it's going to come back and they don't lose any money. So this is a natural thing, whether people are doing stocks or playing poker, people tend to sell a winning stock too early and they hold on to losing stocks too long. And that's emotional based, and you just have to fight it. And I'm still learning. It's not easy to learn. Maybe it's just my personality, but I'm slowly getting better, or at least I'd like to believe I'm getting better. But you're right. I might make that mistake again, but I hope I won't.
So here's an interesting, so the capital gains tax rates, just to look it up again. I just wanted to clarify for anyone that's listening. So up to $41,000, it's zero. You don't pay capital gains tax. If you make between $41,675 to $459,750, then you pay 15% on capital gains. And if you make over $459,750, then you pay 20% on that capital gains, which obviously is a lot less than the tax rate at those income brackets. So holding it for over a year, and I got that from that book. So that's why I prefer these slow flips where you hold it for at least a year. So back to what you were talking about. I think this is like a useful thing that we help each other with is if you know you have a leaning towards not being able to hold when you get that upside, what are you going to do to not do that? I mean, like, what measures are you going to put in place?
It's not like measures to put in place. It really is just I'm getting older. I'm getting more experienced. I know, I'd like to think that I learned from my mistakes, right? In 2009, I held it for a day. In 2020, I held it for like maybe a few months. Maybe
So
the next time, next time it'll be a few years, right? But no.
But then the hard thing is sometimes you do have to sell. Sometimes it's like it may bottom out. So it may be the right call to sell it quickly and just keep that upside.
Yeah, and that's another mistake is I think individuals should fight the urge to believe that they can call a market top, right? Or like, let's say a stock is at a certain point and you think, okay, it's not going to go higher, right? Or it's not going to go lower, whatever. If you think you have that thought enter your mind, try to fight it, right? Like invest in a company because you believe in the company long-term, sell it only when you need the money or there's good reason to sell it, or something fundamentally changed about the economy or the company or the leadership or something, or the product mix or whatever. But generally speaking, we don't know what the future is, right? And the markets are fundamentally unpredictable. Anybody who says that they know where a certain stock is going to be a month from now or where the market's going to be a year from now, whatever, generally they don't know, right? And it's very easy to fall into that trap where, I mean, you go to YouTube right now, there's a million YouTube videos on there about people predicting a stock market crash. And those individuals, they predict a stock market crash like every single year, maybe like every single month, right? And they're going to be right at some point, but 9 times out of 10, they're wrong. People are just horrible at predicting the future. So no, like invest in companies because you believe in them, and sell them because something has changed or you need the money or so. Like you need a good reason to sell. And again, it took me a long time to learn it, and I'm still trying to fight my emotions. But yeah, emotions don't belong in investing. Like try to keep your head clear.
100% agree. And those are the principles I try to follow, where I'll pick a company that I believe in, or an investing stake that I believe in, and I will just leave it until I've hit my predetermined, this is my happy point, and then I'm done. And then I sell at that point. Or if the company I think is still good and has a lot of upside, then I will just sit on it like an egg, let it ride.
Mm-hmm.
It is really funny though, because I was looking at this. We're like mid-December at this point when we're recording this podcast, and then the airline stock, as I'm still holding it, it took a big dip. And I was talking to my wife, and she's like, "We need to sell." And I was like, "Okay, do you buy low or sell? Like, what are we supposed to do? Buy low, sell high?" And she's like, "Buy low, sell high." And I was like, "Where's the stock? It's low." I'm like, "But why would you want to sell it?" She's like, "Because it went down." I'm like, "No, if anything, we should double down." And this is another thing I regret, since we're talking about regrets. When it dipped, I thought I should put more money into this stock that it dipped, but I'm saving I put like a ton of money into Tesla, so I have no money that I want to invest anymore at this point, aggressively. And of course, it dipped down quite a bit, and then it rebounded in like 3 days. So I do regret not putting more money into it.
That's the other mistake, is just don't regret decisions you made in the past. You learn from them, but yeah, I mean, we can sit here and regret decisions we've made all day long. It doesn't help, right? Just learn from the mistake, move on. But you're right. A lot of people recommend that you always have a little bit of cash in your account, like for that purpose, right? Is if there's a bit of a 5% or 10% dip, and there's a company you really like, a stock you really like, and you've been wanting to buy it for a long time, but it was too expensive, and now there's a dip, you always have a few $1,000s lying around in your account, and then you can take advantage of that opportunity. That's why it's good to have a little bit of cash in your account all the time.
And then I'll talk about a real estate mistake that I've made in the past. So I just started, this was my first investment property I ever bought. And it was it was a brand new townhouse. It was really, really nice. We put nice finishes in it. We screened really well, had a property manager. And it was this guy who got divorced, and he just wanted a nice place for when his daughters visited him. We're like, and he worked as a carpenter, so he had a good income. We're like, this is a great tenant. He's responsible. He's looking after we want his daughters and his family to have a nice, safe place. It was in a nice neighborhood. And of course, for several months, it worked out great. But of course, he hurt his hand because something has to happen. So he hurt his hand and he said, well, I can't pay my rent because I haven't been working. Can you like cut me some slack? So as a landlord, I said, all right, that's totally fine. You can just make it up the next month. Of course, the next month comes by and he can't work. And then 2 months go by, and then 3 months go by. And of course, everyone thinks landlords are wealthy, but like I was a medical student this time and I was like scraping together money to buy this property. And I said, well, I'm eating the bill for you to live. I mean, like, you can think of it like I'm just being generous, letting him to live, but really like I am paying for him to live there for free. So that's coming out of my pocket. It's not like I have a ton of disposable money. So 3 months go by and eventually I said, like, you need to either pay me or move out. So like figure it out, or like we need to like end this because I've paid for you to live for 3 months at this point. Like this cannot go on. And this was in Ontario, and there's a lot of rent controls in Ontario. And based on that, I no longer like investing in places with really strong rent controls, because in order for him to move out, like if I wanted to evict him, I would have to give him multiple months, because I'm already 3 months into him like paying me. So eventually 6 months into this without him paying any rent, so him living for me for free, which is a lot of money. So I think the rent was like $1,300 or something like that, because it was a really nice apartment. He took $1,300 times 6 from me because I had to cover that mortgage. And eventually he moved out, and I felt bad for him. It's unfortunate, but I still paid for him to live for free for 6 months. So my lesson from that is I no longer invest in areas of heavy rent control. And that's a whole other economic talk about why rent control is bad. And I can talk about that at length because I spent a lot of time learning about it from this. And I also learned that if someone can't pay rent, like the bank doesn't care if I don't pay rent. They just need their money. So if I don't pay the bank their money, they're going to take the house, and then I lose my entire investment. So if you have a tenant and they do not pay their rent on the day it's due, they get served papers, because if I don't pay the bank, then I have the consequence of I am served papers. And that's it. It sounds harsh, but that's unfortunately the reality. Like I can't walk into a grocery store and walk out with an apple, because then I will go to jail for stealing. And if someone's living and not paying for rent, they really are stealing space from you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a risk every landlord takes. And you're right. Usually there are some jurisdictions that are definitely renter friendly, and there are some jurisdictions that are more landlord friendly. But that can make a big difference. That especially if you get unlucky with a tenant who, for whatever reason, can't or won't pay, it can be very challenging as a landlord, for sure. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, because my first 2 rental properties, I didn't make money on. I didn't lose money on, but I didn't make money on. And that's okay. So that's another good discussion here so I got married in 2004. And then in 2005, my wife and I bought a 1-bedroom condo. This was in the Detroit area. And we lived there. We liked it. It was a good location, blah, blah, blah. And then we were expecting our first child. And so we bought a 2-bedroom condo in the same building. We kept the 1-bedroom condo and rented it out, right? And the 1-bedroom condo, when it was rented out, it was cash flow positive. It was great. And then we moved to a different city, and we're like, hey, you know what? Let's keep the 2-bedroom condo and rent it out. So for a while, I had a 1-bedroom condo in this nice apartment building rented out, and a 2-bedroom condo rented out. Now, the 2-bedroom condo was not cash flow positive. Like I couldn't get rent high enough, so I was actually paying money every month into it. And then what happened was, this was in the Detroit area. And so in 2008, 2009, like the house prices just cratered, right? And a lot of people lost their jobs. Vacancy was like over 10% in this town. And what happened was, my 2-bedroom was just I couldn't rent it out. So half the time it was sitting there empty. And then The one bedroom was like rented most of the time, and that was kind of okay. But same thing, like it was the value of it was quite low, and so I ended up selling both condos for more or less the same price that I paid for them. So I got zero appreciation, like property appreciation for it, right? I didn't lose money, thank goodness, but I sold both within like $2,000 or $3,000 of the purchase price. And I owned the one bedroom, I think, for 8 years or 9 years. And I owned the two bedroom for maybe 7, and I made no money on it. And
when did you sell?
I sold the one bedroom in 2010 and the two bedroom in 2012.
That's interesting because right now Detroit's doing really well.
And sure enough, had I kept those two, I mind you, like, again, it was a pain in the ass because the two bedroom was like empty half the time. And even when it was rented, it was cash flow negative. So that was a pain in the butt. The one bedroom though, in retrospect, I should have kept because that was cash flow positive when I could rent it. And sure enough, the economy recovered in the Detroit area, like it usually does. If you wait long enough, things will turn around, things get better. And now both of those are worth like twice what I sold them for. Here we are 10 years later, and they're both like worth twice as much. And so, yeah, that's another, if I look back, yeah, maybe getting rid of the two bedroom was not the worst decision, but the one bedroom I probably should have kept. Yeah.
With real estate, it is really one of those things where as long as you don't buy in a horrible area, give it time and the city will pick up. A lesson I learned was, so I bought an investment property in Edmonton, Ontario, and going back to what you said, where no one can predict the future. So this was like 2013. So I belong to this group called the Real Estate Investment Network of Canada, and I paid them and they sent out these economic forecasts. And they said Edmonton was the best city in all of Ontario to invest in. Every single year for the past 10 years, it has gone up in value by about 10% every year. So it's great. And the first property I bought was in Cambridge, Ontario. And even though I had that stint where the guy didn't pay rent for 6 months, Cambridge did really, really well. It went up in value, and I ended up making about $100,000 once I sold that property after about 7 years of owning it. So even with that 6 months of negative cash flow, the appreciation far outstripped it. So based on that, I was like, all right, based on how that went, I was like, let's go to the number one city based on this forecasting group. And of course, as soon as I buy it, because Edmonton was really dependent on oil, as soon as I bought this apartment, this townhouse, oil crashes. Now that townhouse has been rented the whole time, and it's been basically cash flow like slightly negative. So I've just kind of been burning money on it. But I could have sold it. I really wanted to. But to sell it would have been hard because I was locked into a mortgage, and then I'd have to like pay out of this stupid locked-in mortgage. So the lesson from this, the painful lesson is exactly like you said, no one can predict the future. Cash flow is super important. The properties have to cash flow. You cannot bank on appreciation, and it has to cash flow enough to really cover all your expenses and then some, because there are always these weird things that will come up. Now, oil is going up, inflation is going up. So I'm glad I held on to it because I just checked on the Edmonton market and it's starting to like tick up again and look healthy. And of course, while the cash flow has been slightly negative, the mortgage has been paid down, and as you know, the longer you hold the mortgage, or as you hold the mortgage, the more you pay into it. As time goes on, more and more money goes towards the principal. So that's why I'm holding it. But it is really miserable holding a property that you have to keep feeding money to. So
Absolutely.
that's why now I feel really strongly, if you buy a property, it really has to cash flow like comfortably, because I've been burned really good on that one.
I agree. Absolutely. And it's interesting. If you want to simplify it a little bit more, Robert Kiyosaki, right, is adamant, right, in his definition of asset and liability is if you have a rental property and it's cash flow positive and you get cash from it every month, that's an asset. Whereas if you have a rental property or investment property, but it's not cash flow positive and you have to put money in every month, he says that's a liability. Like you just signed a piece of paper that says you are going to be paying so many $100 a month into this, right, for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So absolutely. I believe that 100%. And you definitely want cash flow positive investment properties. Absolutely.
Well, and we've talked about this I think we talked about this in another podcast is, so a lot of people, so I drive a old 2010 RAV4. I bought it for $20,000 and I still own it. And the wheels are a little rusty, but I could buy a more expensive car, but it's a liability. Like as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's depreciated, and it kills me to spend any more than I need to on something that will just be burning cash with minimal upside.
Yep, I agree. So at this point, Kris, let's just quickly recap. So we talked about the various mistakes, like selling a good stock too soon, holding on to losing stock too long, investing in things we know little about, relying on crazy rumors or crackpot websites or whatever, attempting to time the market, and relying on emotions. That's probably a good list right there. Let me know if I missed anything.
No, I think you summarized that really well.
So on that note, there you go. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you make mistakes, learn from them. It's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has the occasional bad day. It's all part of the process.
And when you lose money, you will remember that mistake like there's no tomorrow.
Absolutely.
On that note, stay cash flow positive.
Like, subscribe, follow. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thanks.